Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Andy Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And if you're asking yourself, how do we do that? We have a proven process, and I'm going to include it in the show notes so you can follow and you can watch that podcast and see what we do. All right. And now it's time to introduce today's guest, which is Karena Bell. Hi, Karena.
Hi, Eddie. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me today.
You are very welcome. And, I think we owe you a big shout out to Jeremy Wise, who introduced us and thought that you will be a great match for this podcast. And I think he's absolutely right. So thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And absolutely. And, I'm really excited to be talking to you. So, you are a sought after advisor. You're an executive, a mentor, a connector. You're definitely a connector. And you help businesses increase their efficiency. And that is, we're going to talk about areas that businesses are really encountering inefficiencies and what are some of the processes that you recommend and from your experience work in order to increase efficiencies, because, that is a number one priority for each and every business is to increase efficiency. You can't be efficient enough. There is always room for improvement, right?
Agreed.
So tell us more about yourself. Let's really hear about you. Introduce yourself, which is always the best introduction.
Okay, great. Thank you, Addie. Prior to becoming an entrepreneur, I actually spent about 28 years working in corporate, in enterprise IT, in finance, technology, hardware, software, infrastructure, systems, processes, and design. So I did that for about 28 years. And throughout that process, I was able to hone the services that we offer today as part of our operational efficiencies, cost, and revenue optimization. And what I've done is taken what typically is internally a function within larger organizations and created an advisory firm that can provide those same services for smaller businesses, mid businesses, and large commercial organizations as well, at a fraction of the cost and without the overhead of having the on-site staff to do that. And our approach is a very holistic approach where oftentimes a provider may come in and they look very narrow and very deep. However, we look wide across the organization and we go deep across the organization as well. Because as you know, there's more than one area. In fact, there's so many areas that we can find efficiencies which can either tangibly or intangibly translate into dollars that are put back into the business or increasing the cash flow of a business. And our goal is to help businesses move from survive to thrive or from thrive to expand. And there's a number of ways that can be accomplished. And oftentimes leaders are unaware that the solutions lie within versus externally.
That's so true. Good. So that's a great introduction, but you didn't even mention the name of your firm. What's the name of the firm?
Oh my goodness. It's called ProfitLinz. We are a profit optimization advisory and implementation firm.
Excellent. And if people want to find you, what's the best place to find you? What's your website?
ProfitLinz. It's spelled LINZ.com. ProfitLinz.com.
Great. All right, Karena, so let's dive into it. Profit lines, right? So what are the major profit lines that you encounter in an organization?
The lines that we actually find the most value in, we're able to bring the largest benefit, is actually a number of different, what I consider pillars within an organization. One may be the revenue stream and the optimization of the revenue, the customers, what customers are actually losing the business money on a month-over-month basis. Many times a business may generate a large number of revenue at the top line and think they're doing very well. However, when they look at their profit, between the gap between profit and revenue oftentimes is significant, especially in specific industries. Our goal is to shorten that gap between the revenue and the profit within an organization. So we can do that from the revenue side. We'll look at the customer portfolio to identify through deep analytics what customers are actually losing the company money, and how can we adjust those pricing. How can we add different services to bring them up into the profit line? And then sometimes it may be simply removing those customers from the portfolio to boost the revenue of an organization. There's a number of ways to take a look at that. We also
we'll dive a little bit into it, because this is what I like to do on this podcast. We're all about systems and processes, is really give our audience a value of the process of how can they do it, right? I mean, obviously, we want to go over the different areas. So you said revenue in terms of analyzing the clients. What other lines exist there? So let's name them, and then we'll start diving into some of them.
Sure. Absolutely. It could be supply chain for direct and indirect. There could be elements there that we could save money and improve quality. It could be tax incentives, economic development, clean energy, ESG, carbon credits. It could be cost segregation, where we go in and perform an engineering analysis on the depreciable assets that are typically a 39-year straight line depreciation schedule. We'll identify those assets that we can attach to a 5 or 10-year depreciation schedule and re-inject significant cash flow back into the business. It could be systems, it could be processes, it could be automated tools to sit on top of those systems and processes. It can be contract renegotiations. We provide a bespoke, comprehensive solution when it comes to contract renegotiations. A lot of times people think it's just about cost in a contract, and it's not. It's so much more than that. It's the content of the contract. It's the structure of the contract. It's the compliance of the contract. We recently worked with one of our clients and recovered over $2 million in compliance penalty fees for a service provider who breached his own contract. He did not maintain compliant service logs, and we were able to recover over $2 million for our client because his service provider did not provide the service that he contracted for. Another example is we had a contract where there were 2 termination clauses in the contract, one at the top and one at the bottom. They technically negated each other, so the client could not get out of the contract without a significant penalty. We were able to eliminate those termination clauses, put in a fair clause, and eliminate the termination fee if the contract was terminated in the future. So it's more than that. There's a lot of content around the contracts that are not a month-to-month basis, in addition to the monthly cost. We certainly, and our goal there is to make sure that we're bringing costs back down to fair market value. We want to make sure that we are maintaining and enhancing those existing relationships that are in place. Our intent is never to unseat a vendor, because all things being equal, if everything else is satisfactory for our client and it's just a cost element, we can negotiate that and work in a collaborative way with our clients to achieve their goals.
Great. Okay, good. So we definitely named several lines here. Let's dive into, I'm really interested in the customer, your approach to the customers that are actually bringing us that are profitable customers that we should serve, right? We should keep, we should also seek more like them, as opposed to the customers that we might not enjoy working with, but are also not profitable. So tell me more about your approach to looking at increasing profit by identifying the right revenue.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. And we use a proprietary tool that is based on the analytics of each client. In fact, we will show our clients their customers line by line, by name, and all of the supporting data of where they are positive and negative within the entire pricing system of the client portfolio. And we'll do that on a quarterly basis because most customers are bringing new clients on. So we're continually monitoring that for them, where they can make adjustments if they fall below the line. And then we also, to your earlier point, we want to emphasize, we want to replicate those clients that are most profitable, or the customers that are most profitable for our clients, and dig into the analytics around that, and really put some structure around who is that ideal client or customer. And
so let's talk about it, because I want our listeners that are listening right now to go, I want to do it, right? I mean, obviously they should contact you, work with you, definitely encourage them to do that. But, they're listening to this podcast because they want to get, the information, some information, right? So if you're talking right now to an entrepreneur, to a business owner, and they're asking, well, how can I evaluate my clients? What should I do? It seems like, what would you say? I mean, it seems to me like there will also be some alignment to the purpose, like to your ideal client who you want to work with. Also, the amount of work that you are investing with each one. What is the life value of that customer, right? I mean, what are some of the main points that you look at, or did you suggest to our listeners that they should look at in order to evaluate their ideal client?
To evaluate their ideal client, one thing I would do, if they were going to do it manually, they need to create a table of that client portfolio or that client profile. What makes that client profitable? And have they replicated that same pricing profile throughout their customer base? Oftentimes the answer is no. That a lot of times the customer profile is built from the sales team. And the sales team, oftentimes their incentives are tied to the actual costs that they add into the contract with that customer. And oftentimes they will cut into the profit of that deal or of that profile to close the deal with that customer, versus having boundaries and constraints in there for their sales team. Now, so
it basically affects the entire organization. So once
it does,
yeah. So what would be some of the qualities or some of the criteria that you will recommend for business owners to look at and evaluate whether that client is really a good client for them or customer?
The one area we see a lot of miscalculation is the total cost of goods sold. Oftentimes there is very little documentation or an accurate documentation of what is the total cost of the good to put it in the hand of their customer. And where, again, it comes back to we're making a lot of revenue, so we must be profitable. But then when the books are reconciled, the profits are significantly lower than they anticipate. I would say focus on the total cost of goods sold as your starting point. If you can replicate with confidence from end to end, then the pricing should be set accordingly as well. Oftentimes, pricing is not set based on the data as well. Oftentimes it's set on what competitors are doing or what they feel the price should be, instead of it being driven by the actual data.
Absolutely. So I think here we're talking about two different things, right? We're talking about creating efficiency through correct pricing. That's one thing where you actually evaluate the cost of goods sold, but we're also talking about evaluating your customer base. Depends on your industry. I mean, obviously, if you're selling widgets and the cost of creating widgets is going to be the same for creating widgets, then you know that you're not pricing correctly, right? But if you're working in a service industry and you have a variety of clients where you might charge the same price for servicing different clients with different needs, that also has to do with the clients and the contracts that you have, right? Like you can evaluate a certain contract and you can see that, you know, it's not profitable because the amount of extra time that you have to invest, or amount of extra research you have to do, or the hand holding that you need to do, as opposed to go and look for bigger clients, better clients that suit more the people you want to serve, right?
Absolutely. And that's where, and you bring up a good point. Sometimes the cost, there's very thin margins in the industry, and the industry is very cost sensitive. That's where you would also want to take a look at all of the costs in what it takes to provide that service on the back end. You may not be able to adjust your pricing model, but your cost savings could be recognized on everything it takes to support that model.
Absolutely. So if you were asking me, let's say we have a list of my clients and you were working with me, what questions would you ask me in order for you to actually evaluate whether each one of my clients is the right client and I should keep them, as opposed to working with me on deciding that maybe that particular type of client or those particular clients are not the best for me because they're actually cutting across the profit?
Actually, what we do is we provide a complimentary assessment tool where anyone can put in their company data. I think it's 5 questions, and it will show a summary of what percentage of their clients are profitable and what aren't. Beyond that, then we would actually go into the breakdown of the data and the analytics per client.
We'll include the tool in the show notes, but yeah, so, you know, Karena, you're absolutely right in terms of the pricing, right? I mean, that is like a big factor in terms of, like, you know, you want to have each one of your clients profitable. And, you know, your analysis that you do every quarter is so important in terms of actually analyzing who does that. I mean, people don't do that. They look at the clients on the revenue that they brought, but not on the profitability of the client, right? Which is, you know, when you measure it, it's like very specific, you know, very specific number that you can make decisions, right?
Right.
But, you know, I think there are other factors as well that go into evaluating who do you want to work with. You know, I interviewed many people that talked about, you know, purpose. That's what drives them and how important it is, right? And, you know, alignment with your core values. You know, do you have a client that is fun to work with, or are they really, or, you know, you're dreading to get on a call with them, right? And I know those are factors that are not tangible in terms of pricing, but what's your take on it? How do you handle that?
That is a great question, Addie, because you hit on a fantastic point, that it is all not data driven. All of our decisions on who we work with it's much more than that, especially as a leader of a business or an organization. It is our responsibility on who we partner with and who we don't partner with that will have an impact on our team and the people that are in our care. So yeah, I think alignment with cultures is very important. Also, the mutual respect and the professionalism that is extended, that's very important. To your point, if there is a client that is requiring a significant amount of time, more so than other clients, there is definitely a value in the people that are working with that client. How much time are they spending with that client? Is it having a negative impact on the people that are working with that client. Things like that that could have ripple effects throughout your business. You could essentially lose a wonderful, talented individual because they are working with a client that is less than optimal. And as a leader, it's our responsibility to define and to a degree dictate who we allow in our organization and who will extend beyond us. As a business owner, there's a lot of challenges we take on ourselves that our team does not take on. However, if those personalities or those challenges extend beyond the leader to the team, that's something that everyone in the organization will see. You won't have to say anything. Your actions will show them what is acceptable in the organization and throughout the organization. And it should always be a two-way street. That is very important, that the expectations of how each party will interact should always be a two-way street. And I've had conversations that I call with clients that I call realignment of expectation, where they have not performed to the expectation that was initially set, or was the expectation I expected when working with my team and my support. So we either are able to realign, or we will free up the future in that relationship with our organization. And I think that's critical. I'm really glad you brought that point up because working in corporate for so many decades, and then moving into entrepreneurship and business ownership, we have, I think, a bit more luxury in choosing who we will and who we won't work with.
You're absolutely right. And I experienced the same thing when I started my own company. I decided that, I'm just going to work with people that I can really feel like I can help, and they want the help. And if not, they're not ideal clients. But that's the point is, because I didn't know this conversation is going to go this way, but every time I start talking to a guest, there is like this unique process that I like to create out of the conversation, right? And this one gave me this idea on, we need a process in order to actually evaluate who is our ideal clients and how to maintain them. And obviously the profit and the way that you do it is extremely important, because that is a drive, right? Because you have to make sure that you are actually making the profit that you want to. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fire that client if you're not making profit, but working with you, you can figure out like what are the parameters and what are the things that we can adjust in order to make that client a profitable client, right? So it's either adjustment of pricing, maybe adjustment of the cost of goods. You mentioned supply chain, so maybe we can work on that in terms of like, what is it that we are doing to make it a profitable client? But you do have to set those criteria ahead of time, like in terms of like what profit margin you want to go for, right? Because so you're not surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you bring up a good point on expectation. And when bringing on a client, I always find that it's beneficial to talk about roles and responsibilities of each decision maker on both sides of the table for that agreement. And that you put it up front and say, if there's a misalignment anywhere along our journey together, we need to feel comfortable to come back and have that discussion and make sure that we are realigning where we need to, or making, the adjustments we need to.
That is so true. And those conversations don't always happen, and they need to happen. So it's really a matter of knowing who you want to work with, really understanding your ideal client, because, sometimes even if they're profitable and they're going to get you a lot of money, they're not aligning with your values, with your staff, with your team's values, with what you are putting out there. You shouldn't take them on. They have to be profitable, and they have to have open communication and able to receive the help and able to communicate and align to your to what you're trying to achieve, because it's really like a partnership. You work together to achieve a common goal.
Very much, very much. It is another relationship. in your business ecosystem. And when it comes down to it, it's not just, is the client profitable? If the client requires more time, significant amount of more time than another client, how is that impacting the people he's working with in your organization that are very relationship focused and relationship based? Could that one client potentially encourage 3 of your best people to go elsewhere to another company because they feel they have to work with somebody that they're not aligned with? And that comes from your company culture. They came to your company because of either you or you and the culture that you've built and you've nurtured, and they expect you to protect. And if they feel that that isn't protected and the focus is more on the money that that client will bring without at least consideration for how will that client impact your culture as well, I think that's a significant consideration that many times, especially business owners when they're starting out, will say, I will work with anyone. And that can have a detrimental effect on the team that you're building. And it can also have a detrimental effect on your brand, because every client you bring into your organization now is in alignment with your brand. That is another consideration to make when you are partnering with new clients, is does that client align with my brand? And would I stand next to them in a news conference and we feel that our passion, our purpose, our culture, and what we're working for are aligned? If you answer no to any of those questions, I think you have the answer whether you should or shouldn't work with that client.
I think it's a great analogy. I know I had a client that she mentioned that the way that she knows if it's an ideal client or somebody she wants to work with, she will ask the question, would I feel comfortable inviting them to my house for dinner and have dinner with them? I mean, I know that's maybe it's getting more on a personal level if you like them, but why not? I think it's a great way of evaluating as well. And if the answer is no, then why? So why are you willing to work with them? But anyway, that can go into a whole other conversation. But I think, it's definitely a well-rounded way of looking at who should you be working with. And, you mentioned all the other areas that you help businesses, and I can see how you tremendously can help businesses be more profitable, work, just like it's kind of like don't work harder, but work smarter, right? Because you can just basically streamline and be profitable and in all those areas. So it's kind of like a no-brainer for me that people will just pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, I want an evaluation. I want a free evaluation right now. I need to figure out where I'm losing money, or how can I save, or how can I produce more? Because it's not all about savings. People have that misconception or a wrong idea, because it doesn't mean that now we're going to just cut all your expenses. You're not going to have a business. No, I mean, you might want to invest in those avenues that will actually have a return on investment. And that's basically what you are evaluating. So what have you seen from your experience? What is stopping businesses or entrepreneurs, I would say, because we have to name like the person in charge of that business, what is actually stopping them from being willing to look and being willing to evaluate how they can be more profitable?
I think what comes to mind very brightly is most entrepreneurs are so deep in their own business. And a lot of that is they don't have systems and processes in place. Even if they're a very small business, you're just starting out, if you're a solopreneur, you should have your systems and processes documented so they're repeatable, so you can give them to someone else and someone else can do many of those jobs that take up your day, they take up your time. And I know we hear this a lot, that business owners are in their business, not working on their business, the vision, the strategy, the future. I think that is so critical. Systems or just documenting what you do or what someone has to do is so critical. whether it's a solopreneur or a Fortune 100 company. It applies to all businesses. And I think one of the goals I would share with any business owner that's out there, especially someone who's starting out, be diligent about documenting your processes and work as fast as you can to get to a point where your business is making money to bring others in as soon as possible. I think a lot of business owners hold on to tasks that they could certainly delegate to someone else that would free them up, again, to work on their business and not in their business. I think those are two key areas that any business owner could focus on today. And with implementation, they would notice, they would see, they would have those aha moments and say, wait a minute, why don't I have anything to do at this time of day? I am typically doing X. That's because you created processes that are repeatable that someone else could easily pick up with a minimum amount of training. And you have documentation they can refer back to if they forget something in the process until it becomes that new habit for them. But I would say those are critical for any business, for them to create immediate efficiencies and then allow them the foundation to continue to build and grow on that at an accelerated rate, more than most, because a majority of business owners don't document their processes, even at the simplest form.
Absolutely. And then I think it's answered the question, basically, why are they not looking at where they can be more profitable is because they're in that mess. They're not even thinking that it's even possible. And, it is definitely an aspect that has to be looked at. So this conversation has been very enlightening and a lot of information here about how it can be done. And you shared all those ways. And I know you go into detail when you do your analysis. So I highly recommend that our listeners will go to the show notes and actually do the free assessment, the 5 questions, and really see where they are at, and then talk to Karena. So Karena, we go to ProfitLinz.com, right? That's the website. Is that the best way to contact you, or do you want to give any other information?
They can email me directly at Karena, Karena, at ProfitLinz.com. Absolutely. I would love to hear from anyone. More than anything, what we enjoy doing is advocating and educating as well. Our goal is to provide the information for business owners and business leaders to make informed decisions. Whether they decide to work with us or not, we want our business leaders to be informed when they're making their business decisions. And so we spend a lot of time advocating and providing education and information to your point, for business owners, oftentimes for information they can take back and go apply right away. And then there's elements where we can help support them further in addition to that.
That's beautiful. Well, I want to thank you for being a guest on this podcast. This information has been very informative, a lot of information, a lot of ways that, I hope it gave our listeners food for thought in terms of the different areas that they can actually implement in their business, that they can increase their profit. And thank you very much for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you for having me, Addie. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.